I suppose it was only a matter of time until I decided to make a video like this, especially considering that last week I did a rant video on Team Associated. Um, I had an experience this past weekend that made me think about off road racing in broader terms that I figured I should comment on. And since I have a medium, my YouTube channel, to do that, where I can reach people, I figured that that would be an appropriate medium to make this video for. So let's first go back in time a little bit and try to understand the evolution of RC tracks, off-road RC tracks throughout the ages. Now, in the 1980s and at least the early to mid 1990s, off-road RC tracks had loose, loamy dirt, and you would run a tire like this. Now, the J Concepts Goose Bump had not existed at that time. J Concepts wasn't even a company in the 80s and early 90s, but a tire that was kind of like this, right? Something with deep, knobby treads, deep pins, that kind of tire was a tire that you would use. And the compounds were very, very hard, and that, I think, had more to do with the um, rubber tire technology at the time, kind of limiting, what people did with RC tires. But generally, something knobby like this is what you would use. And then over time, the dirt got to be a little bit finer, and the amount of loam that was on the track got to be a little bit less, right? It would be a little bit thinner. And so you go to something like a whole shot or a double D, or an equivalent tire from other manufacturers. And this tire, actually, even today, this tire is still relevant on a lot of outdoor dirt tracks. It's a really good all-around tire, um, especially when the track is a little bit damp, and the loam is low to medium. This is a perfect tire for an outdoor dirt track. But even still, right, eventually over time, the dirt got to be even finer packed and even less loam, until you had sort of a light dust over the track. And that's when something like a Square Fuzzy or a J Concept splitter would be more appropriate, right? And these ultra shallow pin tires were kind of the norm in the late 90s and early 2000s, until Brian Kinwald and all of his genius decided to flip a tire inside out and ended up with something that looks like this. This is the Losi BK bar tire. And for quite a few years, every manufacturer from Proline to J Concepts to AKA to Panther to everybody, they just flat out copied this design and made a few little variations here and there on the actual design, uh, just so that they can claim they weren't completely copying it. But really, it was a copy of the BK bar, like the suburbs and the barcodes and all of that stuff. They're just variations of a BK bar tire. And it's a brilliant design. You get plenty of forward bite, plenty of side bite. And this tire works really well on a track that's very low dust, very hard packed dirt. And it just works, okay? But then over time, we these really ultra hard packed dirt tracks that have low dust ended up having almost zero dust, and the track itself started to be conditioned with things like sugar or oil of some type, or whatever. So that's when you get to a point where the tread design evolves from a Square Fuzzy to a suburb BK bar type tire to an Electron or a dirt web, which is really just a mixture of a bar tire and an ultra shallow pin tire. And you kind of get sort of the best of both worlds with an Electron. But look at the tread depth. It's very shallow, right? BK bar, granted, this is a worn tread, but this is a relatively shallow tread. So from the 80s all the way through, we've gotten to super shallow treads here, okay, by the time we get to modern times. And now you have some RC tracks that are so hard packed and so finely conditioned that you don't even run an Electron. You run a slick off-road tire. This would be this is a Proline Prime. It's kind of worn in, so you can't see the tread. They have a slight V tread, so that basically they can state that the tire isn't a complete slick tire. Um, But J Concepts has the smoothies, and I think AKA has their own variant of a slick tire. Um, and this has given rise to a lot of debate about what is real off road, at least in the United States on dirt tracks, right? All of these tires from left to right can all be run on dirt tracks of varying types. Okay, this would be your sort of ultra loamy dirt track, all the way down to a finely conditioned, sort of hermetically sealed dirt track. Okay, now technically speaking, this is all off road. And this doesn't even get into the topic of astroturf and carpet, which is a whole separate discussion about whether those are even off road. And it's a fair statement, just if I may digress a little bit, that astroturf and carpet can also be off road, right? I mean, if you're building a track with jumps that requires a car with a suspension to navigate, then it's technically an off road track, right? It's just a different surface from what we had classically used way back in the early days of RC. So where was I going with this? Right. So the thing with carpet and astroturf is that even though you use something like a pin tire, I mean, I don't have anything here that really represents a carpet or astro tire, but it's kind of a sharp pin tire that's very hard compound rubber. Technically, it's not a slick, right? But you actually get comparable or greater grip on a carpet or astroturf track as you would on a conditioned dirt track with slick tires. So, the customers clearly over time have wanted higher and higher traction on their off-road track surface. And hobby shop owners not wanting to lose business have had to concede that. And in addition to that, they have generally evolved towards these harder packed dirt tracks for maintenance reasons, right? When you have a really hard packed dirt track with no loam and just finely conditioned, all you really have to do is water the track and sweep it once in a while. And the surface stays in a nice sort of consistent condition. And a lot of drivers are happy with that. When you have a loamy, sort of loose dirt track, these can actually require a bit of maintenance, right? You don't want to sweep those tracks because then you just push the loam off to the side and you defeat the purpose of having a loamy track. So you have to use rakes and you have to rake all the loam back into the racing line to keep everything nice and fluffy and soft so that a tire like this works, okay? But that takes more work than just having a track that uses something like a prime or an astroturf or a carpet track. Now, I oftentimes have mixed feelings about, where off-road RC is headed. I don't think that indoor, finely tuned or finely, treated tracks are really the answer for the hobby, especially, being in the United States where we typically run on dirt more than astro or carpet. Um, when you're indoors on a dirt track that's smooth, a lot of people use traction compound to, make the tires even softer to get more grip. And I mean, on the one hand, or for one thing, I don't think traction compound is necessary. I personally don't use it. At the very most, I use warm water with Simple Green. And even then, I don't do it all the time. But a lot of guys, that I know, they just love traction compound because it gives them more grip. Or maybe it doesn't really, but it gives them the placebo effect of feeling like there's more grip. And that gives them a psychological advantage. Okay, fine. But, none of the traction compound manufacturers list what chemicals go into that traction compound. Is it acetone? Is it diesel fuel? Is it butane? I mean, it's clearly some kind of very strong solvent because this stuff smells like shit. And it basically smells like brain cancer anytime you open any of these containers. And any manufacturer that, puts some kind of smell neutraling agent in the traction compound so that they can claim that the smell is odorless or that it smells like, peaches and flowers, all they're really doing is masking the chemicals that are in this stuff, and you don't know what you're breathing in. And oftentimes I go to indoor RC races where I'm surrounded by this stuff, and I have to hold my breath anytime I walk by a pit stop where people are using this stuff. And it's very, I mean, to me personally, it's disconcerting, and I think it kind of, it doesn't fall within the spirit of the hobby where you're just using your tire and your driving skill to win. You're kind of artificially making the tire better by putting junk on it that's probably going to give you cancer in the long run just so you can win a stupid toy car race. It doesn't make sense to me. But some people want to do it. There's a market for it, so I understand that. I just personally am not a big fan of it. So if you had something like an outdoor loamy dirt track, you don't have to worry about that, right? Nobody uses traction compound on loamy dirt. You just run, a big, thick pin type of tire, and you just go out there and you pull rooster tails and you just drive the car. But as you go toward these shallower pin tires or bar tires or slick tires, there's a higher propensity to use traction compound, and I think that's dangerous on multiple levels, right? If you have kids that are coming into the hobby and they don't like the smell of this stuff, you can end up alienating future customers just because of how the hobby smells. It's just stupid. I don't know. Um, so what else did I want to say here? I clearly have strong opinions about indoor, finely sort of maintained tracks. I get that that's where the hobby has headed over the past few years, and I still have fun racing on those tracks. I'll have fun racing pretty much anywhere. I just think that there's more stress involved on these kinds of tracks, and it at times it's not as enjoyable as just racing on loose dirt. This stuff is way more fun. Probably precisely because the traction's lower, and so you have to work a little harder to find mechanical grip, and that's, for me personally, that's part of the fun. So I went to an outdoor dirt race this past weekend, and I always show up early to get as much practice as I can, and pretty much all day the track was great. I had a lot of fun. There was just pulling rooster tails, and the dirt was nice and loamy. And every hour or so, they'd lightly water the track to keep the dirt nice and soft and loamy, and it was great. And then some asshole came by later and started sweeping the track because most of the guys on the track were using mid-motor cars, and mid-motor isn't really meant for loose dirt. It's meant more for higher grip dirt or astroturf. But because everyone was running mid-motor and they wanted more grip and they were used to running on these kinds of tracks, but they were more on this kind of track the other day, they figured, oh, well, if we swept the track, we'd have more traction. And so we can run, a square fuzzy or a whole shot with a mid-motor car, and the car would feel great. Yes, that's technically true, but first off, you're disrespecting the track owner and their intentions by building the track as a loose dirt track. Secondly, you're also disrespecting the surface itself. The whole point of racing on loose dirt is to force you to use these kinds of tires. Okay? And if you want to sweep the track so that you can use these kinds of tires, then, there's a lot of strong language I can use here, but I would say, just go to an indoor track. If you want grip, go to an indoor track. Okay? The point of an outdoor track is to use these tires and not sweep the track. So these guys swept the track. They moved all of the nice, soft, loamy dirt completely off of the racing line where it wasn't supposed to be. And then underneath, you have this hard-packed dirt that has, maybe some rocks in it or something. And then over time, that's going to get all kicked up, and the track will end up getting completely blown out. Because if you sweep the dirt off, if you sweep the loam away, what happens when cars drive over the track? Well, they kick up some dirt, they wear into the track a little bit more, and then the track starts to break down layer by layer by layer until there's nothing left. And then the drivers are complaining about how the track is blown out. Well, that's because they were the source of the problem to begin with. If they would have not swept the track and kept the top surface loamy as it should have been, then you could keep racing on this kind of tire all season. Okay? So I was unbelievably pissed off when I saw that happening. And, at the end of the day, I guess I'm a minority voice among the people I race with, who generally tend to prefer these kinds of tracks. And I lament that fact that you know I'm that I feel like I'm a minority voice for people who would advocate for this kind of a track in a world of drivers who would rather run on this kind of a track. And it's very frustrating. Um, but it's what it is. This is where RC is headed. Um, and it's really sad to me to think that if I want to run on a track that requires pin tires, that my best bet is to just go to an astroturf track. That's pathetic. And there's no disrespect towards you folks in the UK and in the rest of Europe and maybe in Japan who run on astroturf all the time. But there may be other reasons for that, right? I understand in the UK, the weather is not so great, so you have to run inside, and you take maybe you'll rent out like a basketball court or something and set up a makeshift track there out of carpet or astro, and if that works, that's great. But if you have a permanent track, there's no reason not to try to make it a dirt track, in my personal opinion. So that's kind of, I guess I can go on forever about this, but I wanted to sort of vent a little bit here. I had once I saw that guy sweeping a loamy dirt track, I just completely, I almost lost it. It almost made me want to cry. Practically, it was very frustrating. But it's so sad to see that that's what people think about outdoor dirt tracks. They want to destroy the track so that they can have high grip with their mid motor cars that aren't even meant for that kind of track, or just because they're too stupid and they can't figure out how to set up that car for that track surface. They want to run their indoor setup on an outdoor track, and they don't want to play around with pistons and oil and springs and weight distribution to at least try to make a mid-motor car work on that track. Just, let's just sweep the track and everything will be fine. It pisses me off to no end. But I guess that's where we're headed. So we will see over the next few years or so where the hobby goes as far as 1/10 scale off-road racing is concerned. What the next IFMAR Worlds is going to be like, what surface is going to be on, what the next 5 IFMAR Off-Road Worlds is going to be like. Maybe it'll come full circle. The last 10 scale Worlds in Japan was on AstroTurf. Maybe the next one, I'm just guessing here, maybe the next one's going to be on carpet. Maybe it'll get to a point where they do a hybrid type of track like what they did, I think, 2 years ago for the A-Scale Worlds, where it was like part dirt, part concrete. Who knows? And then maybe at some point it'll come full swing back to loose dirt. I am so hopeful for that because this is the most fun you will ever have driving an off-road RC car. I guarantee you. I've never had more fun driving a car on any of these surfaces than with this kind of tire or even this kind of tire on a loose dirt track. And the whole point of this hobby is to have fun and to put a smile on your face. And it's just harder to do that when you're on this tire than when you're on this tire. And if that isn't reason enough for customers and hobby shop owners and the industry as a whole to push towards this direction, then I honestly don't know where this hobby is headed. So I guess that's it for now. Can't think of much more else to say about it, so I'll stop it here. Thanks for watching.